concentrated back on what you're doing. Because it's the development of the exercise of meditation which leads to a forming of the spirit, which produces the power. The forming of the spirit is forming an idea clearly and strongly that the spirit itself attaches itself to, and you become strong then. When you purely observe yourself, you begin to see all of your thoughts, the strong points, the weak points, the indicators of who you are. Then you can do something about changing these thoughts within yourself. You're going to learn how to do that also. It'll just come to you. See, the pure observation supports the noble and the positive forces of the individual's inner being and brings them to full consciousness. Your self-reliance will be greatly strengthened once you clearly start observing yourself and learn to change your pre-programming, your material emotions and attitudes and feelings. You can change those through the use of your spiritual self. So the simple idea of powerful powerlessness is an effective factor in the formation of a well-balanced material conscious. See, a balance is an equal balance between material self and spiritual self, where we go through life, using our material self, which we obviously do to gather information and form logical patterns and so forth, but we should have to get in the habit of balancing that out with consulting and using our spiritual self all the time for wisdom and for growth. Talk just for a minute here about spirit liberation. It's a phrase that Billy uses in his book, and it's referring to actually liberating the spirit from illogical thinking. And that's his view of what most of us are doing all the time, that we go through our daily life in our material world, doing things, the way we were trained, observing the world the way we're shown to and the way we're practicing. And we live, especially if you live in a big area like L.A., in order to defend yourself, you develop a lot of habits, attitudes, and emotions about the area that you live. Women, unfortunately, have to protect themselves quite often from unusual characters making advancing to them. Women seldom will smile back in another car or whatever because they don't want you following some guy following them home, and it's just not a safe world, and that's quite unfortunate. But you can't blame them then for pulling into themselves and hiding that way. But it's an illogical world that we live in. Things aren't done for the right reasons. They're done for money, power, greed, control over another individual. In very few places do you find where the world's actually operating on the wisdom system, where people are living by the spiritual logic of the creation. You don't find that in too many places. So spirit liberation is actually liberating your spirit from having to live in illogical thinking. If you make a real effort to purely observe human beings, animals, plants, and different events and so forth, you're going to find a great change in your life. There will be a development of harmony within your life. You'll start walking around with a feeling of comfort and of freedom. You'll feel protected from the external environment and its impure logic. By acting towards your fellow man through pure observation, you'll now see him as a spirit full of love and hope traveling on his own path of evolution. Not that he's competing with you, interfering with you, and getting in the way of your life, which is materially how we generally think. We pass judgment right away on people when we see them. Women immediately react whether or not that they're interested. A man does the same thing. He sees a woman all too frequently just as a sex object or what he can get. I mean, not all people are like that, but most. And that happens all too often, unfortunately, in our society. We see animals sometimes as things to get out of the way, things to eat, things to kill, whatever. We're ruining our planet. We're ruining our oceans because of no respect. We don't observe it as a spiritual thing. We're damaging the planet because we have no respect for the planet whatsoever. We do not see that as part of creation. We don't see that as a spiritual thing. Meditation will teach us. It will, if you meditate properly, we could cure most of the problems of the world, because through meditation you cannot observe things that way. When you meditate clearly and cleanly, you see things exactly as they are. You see an ocean and an animal and a human being and a plant and a tree exactly for what they are, spiritual things within creation. And then your attitude about them is totally different. And once you develop that habit, you start forming more power of the spirit. The power comes from the fact that your spirit then rises up in its force and its ability to interface with your life. You find yourself using your spiritual awareness of things more and more, your spiritual abilities to observe, and you draw off of your maximum wisdom available. Okay? The last thing I want to talk about as far as the philosophy here, and then we'll go through some meditative exercises, is what Billy calls the clarity of knowledge. Through the clarity of knowledge and meditation, the individual now enters the realm of teaching himself. This means that the meditative exercise can be introduced into the daily life so that you can use your new ability to see things clearly in conjunction with the daily process of actions of words and deeds. And we've talked about that already, how we can become a balanced individual where we don't see things as negative or positive. We see things from a more balanced viewpoint, a neutral viewpoint by virtue of our keen observation. We are beginning to balance out ourselves so we are living our life as a material person, but we're also using our spirit. You can begin to teach yourself new ways to react in the material world through these new knowledges you're learning about through your spirit. You'll keep the meditative exercise kind of always ready. It's always kind of on call and on hand, so you can call upon it anytime you want to facilitate yourself during the daily life. Remember the pause? If you want to have some fun the next few days, just teach yourself to pause. Like every hour on the hour, pause for 20 seconds and observe exactly what's going on around you. Just observe. When you observe, don't make any judgments or any opinions. Just observe things, Spock-like, see things like a microscope exactly as they are. Okay? Through extremely clear knowledge, brought on by pure observation, there's a slow breakdown in the delusion of ego. You'll see the world a lot clearer. You begin to create a new way of thinking which uses your wisdom. Final thought here, the meditation method has 3 basic steps to it. And the first steps is finding applications for yourself. The meditative exercises are primarily for yourself. One, to develop the knowledge and so forth of your spirit, to learn to use the force of your spirit, to learn through the meditative exercise how to observe things clearly. But those are all things about the self, right? They're all me, I. The second thing you need to do is spread out at a later date after you've accomplished those levels of understanding, and spread out and start applying these principles to other people. Observe other people and how they react, and learn to observe other things without your own influences, without your own ideas, to be an observer of the outside world, okay? And finally, you find applications where both are involved, where you see applications where you personally are interfacing with the outside world, and you observe that. The reason is that this 3-part rhythm is so important because all partialities, imperfections, dangers of exclusive introversion or extroversion of the consciousness will be avoided. So we want to be careful of turning our conscious thoughts inward or outward on purpose. By that I mean it's possible that you can create what's called euphoric meditation. And the 3-part meditative exercise is kind of like a checklist, and that helps you avoid that. Euphoric meditation is it's a process that you can fall into causing illusions, can be dangerous to yourself. For instance, if you engage in pure introversion, turning inward, purely inward, you will have what are called euphoric hallucinations. They appear. They build themselves up and become illusions, and then you begin to lose the sense of reality. You can no longer make a free decision then when that happens. Your introversion will be connected with desires and pleasures, and you create like a mania and you lose reality. This is what people do when they channel, unfortunately. See, refer back again to our little drawing of the material side and the spiritual side, and what I told you earlier. What channeling is when a person begins to meditate, and they allow their ego to become involved, and without even being aware of it, their psyche, which contains their feelings and thinkings and so forth, then produces an hallucination, and they're not even aware where this is coming from. Out of this, because of their ego, which can be subconscious desires to be liked, wanted, or whatever, the meditation never gets deep enough, immerses deep enough, and becomes clear enough where it gets into the spirit. It never